So hello everybody, my name is Peter Ebeling and I'm head of the Department of Medicine at the School of Clinical Sciences at Monash University. So it's really great that you're interested in doing a PhD or research higher degree with us. And I thought I'd let you know about the groups we have with research within the Department of Medicine. And you've been meeting with them already this afternoon to hear about the research that they're conducting. And in this session, we'll be concentrating on the groups that are involved in clinical research. So you may have already heard about basic or translational research from the other groups. But from this slide, you can see that there are many different types of research that go on in the Department of Medicine. We have about 260 research active staff and a very large number of research higher degree students. And these are the areas of research that we have. And infectious and inflammatory diseases is about 50% of the research, and that is done in the Centre of Inflammatory Diseases. But there's research in all these other active areas, including precision medicine and cancer. And tonight we're going to hear from the groups involved in bone and muscle health, and stroke and aging research, and neurology research in particular. So I thought I'd set the scene by just describing the number of high degree research students in the Department of Medicine and what you might expect if you joined us to do a research higher degree with us. So we have a large number of people completing higher degree research in our department. And you can see that the total headcount is gradually increasing and has plateaued from 2018 to 2020. And if you can see the number of completions, we are getting a large number of completions every year as well, with about 45 people completing their PhDs each year. So as regards to the ratio of international students to domestic students, we have about 25%, and they tend to have a lower average mark when they join the Department of Medicine. Overall, we have about 72 people completing research higher degrees. Now, the average completion time is quite low, and in 2019 and 20, it was about 40 months, and the expected time is longer than that. So you can see that it's just taking over 3 years for most people to complete a PhD with us, and that's 8 months less than expected. When people do discontinue, and there's a very low discontinuation rate, the time they discontinue is just after 12 months. So if we look at the state of play in 2019, we had 72 research higher degree students in the department. And then if we look at those that have completed, 22 had completed, and that had taken them an average of 40 months. And we see a very low discontinuation rate of 4%. So you can be guaranteed of successful completion of your PhD in a relatively short period of time. And I think when you're starting a PhD, I always tell my students that the most important thing is to finish the PhD as quickly as you can. And you'll be remembered for the papers that are published from your PhD rather than the PhD itself. And most of my students are doing their PhD by a compilation of publications, which is better for you and better for the university. So if we think about clinical research opportunities in the Department of Medicine, there's the bone and muscle group and the stroke and aging research group. Now, some of the advantages of doing a clinically orientated PhD is that if you are medically trained, there are top-up scholarships available through my department and Monash Health, which are worth an additional $21,500 a year. And these are clinical academic fellowships. That's in addition to a scholarship for your PhD that you'll get from external funding or university funding. So we also have a biostatistics consultation service that's free, or if you use up all the hours, then it's subsidized subsequently for students if you need any more time with a biostatistician. We've recently formed a biostatistics research interest group, which students are very welcome to join to discuss any statistical problems they're having. And in addition, there is coursework available during your PhD to cover biostatistics. The accommodation we have for people involved in these two research groups is modern with a pleasant open plan, and everybody's guaranteed computer access. So a high level of infrastructure for you pursuing your research. So I'll just talk about my bone and muscle research group now. We're located in the 7th floor of the Translational Research Facility, and Aisha Zengen, who will follow me, is a senior research fellow and is studying ethnic differences in bone structure, and was previously at Cambridge University, where she worked in Gambia studying musculoskeletal health there. David Scott's an associate professor, and he's very interested in the effects of sarcopenia, obesity, and physical activity on bone health. He's recently moved to Deakin University, but still remains as an adjunct within our group. Han Nguyen will be talking to you about her PhD project later, is studying atypical femur fractures and bone health in Turner syndrome, which causes a premature or menopause or a lack of periods altogether. And we've got other PhD students, Kari Young, who's looking at exercise and bone health, Anuya Ghanem, who's looking at sarcopenia and obesity, Mabel Servo, who's interested in dietary factors in bone and muscle health, Ewan Sim, who's completing his PhD on a randomized control trial of teriparatide in medication-related osteoporosis of the jaw, Navira Samad, who's recently started one on premature ovarian insufficiency, and Maddie Harath, who's doing one in inflammatory conditions and bone health. We also have a full-time research assistant, Catherine Shaw-Laurenti, and she's very good at helping students with their ethics submissions and other aspects. So we have a lot of support for our students. Alexander Rodriguez has recently completed his PhD last year, and as well as being a medical student at Griffith University, he's continuing to be a part-time postdoc with our group and looking at the influence of bone loss and osteoporosis drugs on cardiovascular disease in older adults. So really we do a lot of clinical trials on new pharmaceuticals, calcium, vitamin D and exercise, on fracture prevention and bone and muscle health. We're interested in genetic studies and clinical features of atypical femur fractures, and my slides have just started to go everywhere, and population-based studies of osteoporosis and sarcopenia, and platforms which Aisha will talk about more, but we've got very advanced bone imaging facilities available. So one of the current projects Han will be talking about more is about anti-resorptive therapy being implicated in atypical femur fractures. And we've formed an international collaboration called Traffic. And what we're doing is identifying clinical risk factors, including Asian ethnicity, and monitor outcomes for AFF, including using high resolution PQCT and genetic studies with whole exome sequencing for genetic risk factors. And we're identifying bone geometric factors associated with AFF, and a novel machine learning and AI approach to make the diagnosis of AFF by X-ray. And this is an X-ray of one of these fractures on the right. And the patient is just standing there and they hear their femur snap, and then they get a lot of pain and they fall to the ground. And this is most often a complication of treatments for osteoporosis. So it's exactly the opposite we want to happen when we treat somebody with osteoporosis. But fortunately, it affects a very small minority of patients who are treated with the conventional anti-resorptive drugs for osteoporosis. So our aim is to find out why this is occurring and to not use these drugs in patients who might be at risk. And one of the exciting things we've identified is a new measurement called the femoral alignment score. And this is how the femur is aligned to the body. And there's a vertical line of the body, and we're working out the angles that are involved and how this femur is aligned with the rest of the body. And we've worked out this score called the femoral alignment score. And we've been able to discriminate between patients who don't get atypical femur fractures and those that do in a pilot study. So we're conducting further research to confirm this in larger cohorts. And this is certainly a project that we'd like to attract a PhD student to in the future. And there are probably a couple of PhD projects that we've got in the atypical femur fracture space. And we're already publishing from this. And I think Han got 3 publications in this area from her PhD. So I'd like to just show a picture of our group and the facility where we are in the Translational Research Facility. And thank you for your attention. I'll hand over now to Aisha Zengin, who's going to talk about her projects that are available for research higher degree students.
Thanks, Peter. I'll just bring up my screen. Okay, so my name is Aisha Zengin. I'm a Senior Research Fellow within the Bone and Muscle Research Group, together working with Peter. I have 3 minutes to quickly explain a little bit about our group. So we have a world-class bone imaging suite. We're actually quite lucky. I'll tell you a little bit about some of the imaging machines that we have. The first one is the dual energy X-ray absorbiometry, or DEXA, and it's the current clinical gold standard for diagnosing osteoporosis. So with this machine, we can scan whole body bone mineral density, as you can see here in this image output below, but we can also measure whole body fat mass seen in the yellow here, and the lean mass seen in the red. We can also specifically scan the hip and the spine, so fracture relevant sites. Now, if we have a look at this device over here, it's called the High Resolution Peripheral Quantitative Computed Tomography. That's a mouthful. Let's just call it the HRPQCT. And essentially, that's like the Ferrari of all bone imaging devices. It can scan, it's currently the highest resolution possible that we can scan bone at currently. And this machine is, it's very unique in that we can scan the separate compartments within bone. So the green here in this GIF that you can see, the trabecular bone, and the outer shell, the cortical bone, and also the subcortical region, which we're interested in, particularly because we are looking at the aging population. And so with this machine, we can scan the arm and the leg. We're also interested in looking at muscle strength. So we look at this by using a hand dynamometer and measure hand grip strength, and also a ground reaction force platform to measure muscle force and muscle power in the lower legs. And very briefly, I'll tell you about 2 of the studies that we're running at the moment. So the study of Indigenous muscle and bone aging, or SIMBA. It's the first study in the country to investigate why falls and fracture risk are increased in Indigenous Australians. Now, importantly, this study was co-designed with the Aboriginal Health Service out at Dandenong, the Bunurong Health Service, and it's funded by Osteoporosis Australia, which is the leading osteoporosis society in Australia, and Amgen. And basically it's a longitudinal study that will assess bone mineral density, body composition, muscle strength with the devices that I just explained previously, and we'll also be looking at biomarkers. And just to let you know, ethics has been approved for this study, so we're ready to start recruiting. And just very quickly, the second study is the Hemophilia Osteoporosis Registry, or THOR. So treatment for hemophilia has improved remarkably, but the literature shows that fracture incidence is quite high in these individuals. The data that's been reported so far has just been of bone mineral density from DEXA, and that shows that bone mineral density is lower in these patients. So the overall aim of this study is to identify the mechanisms of bone loss in patients with hemophilia. And so together with Associate Professor Huan Tran, who's the Director of the Victorian Statewide Unit of Hemophilia out at the Alfred, we'll be recruiting 88 hemophilia patients and 88 controls, and we'll be measuring a wide array of these measurements here. If you'd like to find out more, you can click on or you can scan this QR code and it'll take you to our website and you can get in touch with us like that. So thank you.
Okay. Hi everyone, I'm Professor Dominique Cadilhac. I'm hoping that you're able to see my slides. I've got multiple screens going on. So I'm providing an overview of the Stroke and Ageing Research Group, and then we'll hand over to my team members to describe some of their projects themselves. So the Stroke and Ageing Research Group has various broad divisions of research. Professor Mandy Thrift covers off epidemiology and prevention. And we have Professor Henry Ma and Professor Tan Phan, who undertake and lead the clinical trials imaging and informatics. And we've got the Translational Public Health and Evaluation Group, which I head, and is supported by Associate Professor Monique Killkenny, who leads our data linkage work. Why is it not moving? Okay, so it's a range of projects in neurology are available through Professor Ma and Professor Tan. And one of the specialties of this group are imaging studies, but also analysis of large data using data mining techniques. So this is sort of like the new whiz-bang analysis approaches that can be used. And I guess in the era of COVID, where we have to social distance and we're not necessarily all working in the one place, being able to analyse existing data is an advantage if you're doing a higher degree, because I guess it saves you a bit of time in terms of not having to collect data directly for your project. So if you've got an interest in multiple sclerosis, epilepsy or motor neurone disease, as well as stroke, including treatments for stroke or understanding the consequences of stroke, this group has a number of projects available highlighted on this slide. This brings me now to our group, which is covered off by the Translational Public Health and Evaluation Division. And we are an interdisciplinary team that have clinical expertise in undertaking health services research, economic evaluations, epidemiology studies, and health information management projects that relate to improving the quality of coding of administrative data, for example. We also undertake a range of projects focused on health promotion and prevention. So there's some overlap there with the work that Professor Thrift does, and we work very collaboratively across our two groups. And we also undertake program evaluation. So this is how you can design different models of care and ensure that they're optimised and fit for real world applications. So we really do undertake a number of projects that help apply existing evidence and putting that into practice, and that is the discipline of implementation research. So that's another strength that our group brings. So one of the flagships is that I'm the data custodian for the Australian Stroke Clinical Registry, and this work's done in partnership with the Flora Institute. And our group provides the archives of the de-identified data and a clearinghouse for these data sets. And there are a number of projects that can be undertaken with such a large data set that now exists, from patients across the country. The other advantage of this registry is that when we follow up patients at 90 days after their stroke, we ask them if they want to be contacted for future research studies. So this means that if you have got a project and you're interested in chronic stroke or long-term prevention, you've got a ready cohort that you could apply to see whether they would be interested in completing a survey or an interview. So there's some advantages of that. In terms of potential projects, the things that I'm responsible for, I'm happy to take on students that will want to do a PhD Masters or an honours year program. One of the exciting projects that we're working on is the evaluation of the mobile stroke unit ambulance, which is a fit-for-purpose ambulance that includes brain imaging capability. And we're hoping through the Australian Stroke Alliance to get some further funding to actually implement these across the country. So that'd be a really exciting project to get a PhD working on over the next 3 years. The other one is a large randomised controlled trial of a self-management program for people who leave hospital. And we're also, we've designed a project looking at movement-based mindfulness to reduce anxiety and depression. And this is because 1 in 2 people after stroke will self-report anxiety and depression that is having an impact on their lives. So the clinical trial's well underway. We've almost got 100 people involved, but there are a number of sub-studies that could be added to this for a PhD project or a smaller project. So please contact me if you're interested. But the basis of it is that we do goal setting and then we tailor a bank. We've got a bank of SMS messages that we can then send to people to help support their recovery journey, because once they leave hospital, they often feel abandoned by the healthcare system and really don't know where to turn to for reliable information. So this is working in partnership with patients once they leave hospital to have a better transition to home. So I'll hand over to Monique. I'll do the slides, but maybe Monique, if you want to talk, then I'll switch over.
Hi, thanks for that, Dominique. I'm Monique Killkenny. I'm the head of the National Stroke Day Linkage program. I'm got a background in epidemiology and biostatistics, as well as a background in health information management. So I like anything about big data. So if you like big data sets, we've got data sets from 5 million to 10 million records. So linking the registry, which Dominique was talking about before, the Australian Stroke Clinical Registry, we've linked to the PBS, which is the medications, as well as the doctor visits, the PBS, as well as information linking to the hospital data when you're admitted to hospital, as well as emergency data. So we've got plenty of projects. You can do honours, masters or PhD. I've got have had honours students in the past, and we've got 5 PhD students at the moment. And so one of the PhD students looking at understanding adherence to pharmacological interventions. So this person's looking at secondary prevention, but you also want to look at primary prevention pharmacological. We've also about to get another very large data set, which is looking at general practice. We want to understand what's actually happening in general practice. Are people being managed appropriately for stroke in general practice? And as Dominique mentioned before, with my background in coding, I've got a number of projects to try and improve not only the coding, but actually the clinical documentation in medical records and now electronic medical records. Another project is to look at evaluation of stroke indices and risk factors for stroke developing with acute coronary syndrome in Australia. Do you want to just, next slide, Dominique? So what we're trying to do with these large data sets is trying to understand what's actually happened prior to someone's had the stroke, in the hospital, as well as after stroke. So by using these large data sets, we can understand the whole patient journey, the whole continuum of stroke care. Next slide, Dominique. So as you can see, you know, by linking the Australian Stroke Clinical Registry, which has over 100,000 patients, we can understand the mortality by linking to the deaths, understand the administrative data, are they readmitted after stroke, understand medications, what's happening in aged care, as Dominique mentioned before with the ambulance, with the Melbourne Stroke ambulance, looking at rehabilitation as well as general practice. So I'll pass you on to Joosup, who's head of the health economics now.
Yeah, hi, my name's Joosup. I won't take too much more time because I think a lot of the projects have already been mentioned, but a lot of my potential projects just involve looking at the costs of the interventions that Dominique and Monique have mentioned. So the major project that I probably have going at the moment is the economic evaluation of the Melbourne Mobile Stroke Unit. Obviously it's a very expensive piece of technology, and we want to make sure that, we want to find out if it's value for money and where it has the most value for money. We've also got a number of projects looking at the costs of stroke care, because this is a really, this is a field where there's not much evidence, or at the moment, or I guess not much recent evidence anyway. Next slide, Dom. And I guess the one thing that I want to point out with some of these projects is that that the data linkage is quite complex, but it also allows us to be creative with some of the ways that we evaluate a service. So this is just a figure that I've prepared to show how we might compare a typical ambulance service to a mobile stroke to a service with a mobile stroke unit. Dom, you'll have to click the animations, but yeah, we'll be. That didn't work quite well, but I think you get my point that these data sets are quite complex, and we can look at a question we can look to answer a question in a lot of ways. Thanks.
Now we're going to ask Han Nguyen to talk about her PhD, and then we'll open up for question and answers. So thanks very much, Han.
Hello, so my name's Han Nguyen. I'm an endocrinologist, and I've just submitted my PhD under the supervision of Peter Ebeling in the Department of Medicine. As an endocrinologist, I was really interested in doing clinical research in the area of osteoporosis and bone health, and Peter had a really great project in an area that was very important in the field. So he has already talked about atypical femur fractures and how, even though they were really rare, they actually have such significant impact on how we treat and manage osteoporosis, as there's been a reduction in uptake of osteoporosis therapies due to fear of these medications, leading to atypical femur fractures. So my PhD was actually looking at the potential risk factors, clinical and genetic risk factors associated with atypical femur fractures. And I actually had the opportunity to set up a registry called as part of the traffic study locally in Victoria, but we also have sites interstate, and we've also got sites internationally. And so there's, and I guess what is good about this registry is that we have a lot of data that we actually haven't analysed yet. So there's potential there for future projects if anyone is interested. So during my PhD, I did have 3 publications from this area. And I guess what I looked at was local data at Monash Health and our atypical femur fracture cohort there, looking at clinical risk factors. I also did a systematic review looking at candidate genes that might be associated with atypical femur fractures, and that's really helped with leading other research projects, also other research projects looking at these particular genes. I then described two families who had atypical femur fractures in siblings. And finally, I worked on hip geometry in atypical femur fractures and how that may contribute to the development of atypical femur fractures. And this is where we were able to develop a tool called the femoral alignment score, which we've shown is associated with atypical femur fractures. But what we do need to do is now validate this and this tool. So that's an area, as Peter's mentioned, that is possible projects for future students. So that's sort of, in a nutshell, what I have done as part of my project, as part of my PhD, and very happy to take any questions with regards to that.
So we've got a short time to open up for questions. If anybody's got any questions, we'll try and answer them. So you can do it through the Q&A function on Zoom. So we've had a few questions during the meeting, and they've been answered in the Q&A function. So they're about honours projects that are available, and they're both available in our group, and we've had 100% success rate in our group anyway for honours students for the last few years. So I can't see any other questions. If not, there's one coming through maybe. I'll refresh that. Are the academic records mostly looked at for joining honours or masters? Probably in terms of getting funding for a scholarship, we probably look at them for both. So, but probably they're more carefully looked at for a master's than an honours. Probably that's the way to answer that. Now there's another question. I've recently graduated with a Bachelor of Science, majoring in chemical biotechnology. And I'm interested in positions such as regulatory submissions coordinator. So do you have any advice on how I can work towards this career goal? Yeah, I think probably experience in sort of ethics submissions and that sort of thing would be a good grounding in that. And that can certainly be done through the research that we do. So maybe the others, Dom would like to answer that one as well.
Yeah, I guess you do need a background in research to help with roles like that, and having a broad background in different types of projects as well. So it certainly would be advantageous to understand different research designs and methods. And if you were to do a higher degree to help support that, then that's one way of getting some of that background knowledge.
Yeah, and we do a lot of those sort of aspects in clinical work, don't we? Like if we think about ethics submissions and other regulatory processes that we have to do. So that would be a good grounding for this sort of work. Okay. I think there aren't any other questions. So what I would like to do is thank all of the presenters very much. But most of all, I'd like to thank the attendees for coming, and we can answer any more questions if you'd like to email us directly, and a recording of this will be available as well. So thank you all and have a lovely evening.